Hi, I'm Jeff Braun.
Hi, I'm Ross Bentley.
And I'm Sam Smith.
And this is No Dumb
Questions.
Questions?
I think we got an echo almost like that. That was pretty cool.
Right. We'll tell everybody we did that on purpose.
Yeah.
Oh, totally. Obviously.
Yeah.
Right. Always.
Yeah.
Well, we're back again, and this is kind of a special episode. We got some exciting stuff going on. We got Sam back with us again because he's got some pretty cool news. I'll let Sam take it from here.
So you may have heard last episode that Ross and Jeff and I are putting together a podcast. Matter of fact, we've already done it. It can be found anywhere you find your podcasts. It's called It's Not the Car, and it's the three of us, plus the occasional special guest, pulling apart moments from motorsport. That could be last week, that could be 6 months ago, that could be 50 years ago. But there's a bunch of different components. We have a handful of different types of shows. We have a handful of different ways to look at this stuff. But ultimately, it's all three guys who have a lot of questions and know a little bit about a bunch of different things that don't necessarily overlap with what the other person knows or the other person in the trio. And we have a lot of fun with it. But it went live, what was it, earlier this week, I guess, right, guys?
Yeah. I'm excited.
So I'm stoked, and that doesn't mean so. No Dumb Questions is going to continue. It'll pop up on It's Not the Car with some frequency, and this is the last episode on Speed Secrets. Which actually that shouldn't be my announcement, Ross. That's yours, isn't it?
I'm tears are rolling down my cheeks. No, actually, and I don't know what's going to happen with the Speed Secrets podcast. That's a big mystery. I think I touched on that last show. It's a big mystery, partially because we haven't figured out what we're going to do with it. But, I'm not going to say it's never going to happen again, but I will say that It's Not the Car is something that, we've had a blast putting together. And Sam, you touched on, we have some other themes as well. One of them being, we will do some No Dumb Question episodes. But some other ones were like, Sam talks about a thing that he nerds out about.
Pitch it like that sounds amazing.
Yeah, they are a blast because Sam as a storyteller is over the top fantastic.
Exactly that.
Oh, thanks.
We've taped some of these. Well, you don't tape anymore. We've recorded some of these.
Yeah,
and the Sam talks about a thing. Those are pretty freaking awesome episodes. I like those.
But it's not just about, you guys are very kind, but it isn't just about me. It's the three of us because we happen to like a lot of the same things and have a lot of the same interests that overlap. And it's pretty much going to be a version of what happens here, crossed with a lot of other things that you find in Ross's books, in Jeff's career in books, in my writing for Road and Track and much of other places. And we'll shake it up. There'll be a little bit of a change from week to week, one episode a week, and head on over if you get a chance. Subscribe, drop us a comment, drop us an email. Let us know what you think.
Yep. And keep the questions coming because there's like Ross and Sam said, we're going to do some of these no dumb questions in It's Not the Car. So it'll be embedded in there. We're still doing some of that stuff occasionally. So it's just going to be a better version of what we're doing here.
Bigger, better, bolder, whatever. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And Sam has been very kind to us, Jeff. Because one of the other episodes we're going to do every now and then is going to be a Jeff teaches Sam a thing or Ross teaches Sam a thing. Right. So, and then I can't wait for the Sam teaches us a thing.
Oh,
which you guys he does that nonstop.
Right.
But no, so that's I guess that's what I'm so excited about with it is we have one main episode every month where we pull apart a story from motorsport, and the other three episodes that month have recurring themes. So one might be Ross teaches me something about driver coaching, or I sit and ask Jeff all of my dumb engineering questions that might mimic your dumb engineering questions, or we have special guests on from all of our careers in the racing world, from motorsport, from media. There's a number of different things and a bunch of different threads. We've had a lot of fun pulling so far and can't wait to pull more.
Yeah,
yep, exactly.
Yeah. So when you're done here, be sure to go over to It's Not the Car.
Yep.
Check it out. Let us know. Yeah. In the meantime.
All right. Let's, Sam
Yeah. So you guys were kind enough to let me ask the questions last time, and I somehow get that privilege again. So staring at the giant uber secret, top secret cave list of questions for NDQ, we have one without a name on it, but just says, it's a really interesting question, actually. It says, what do you do and how do you think differently when you don't know what to do next as an engineer? I've got a club racing car with the usual set of parts on it for the class. Everything everyone runs, all the usual stuff. My driver is relatively talented, and we know we're at the point where setup in the car are holding us back. We've tried all the usual stuff, adjusted everything we can adjust, and we know the car's working right. It's just not quick enough. How do you start trying to find answers when you don't know the question? And I'm going to listen very carefully because I don't have any answers on anything. Jeff?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. Go.
Well... that brings back some memories. I was going to say, well, that's never happened to me, but that happens to me a lot. So I had to think about, what do I do? There's a lot of answers. You can panic. You can start to try to steal setups from your competition. You can make excuses. That I see that happen a lot. You can blame it on something else. You can, but those are the
wait a minute,
ones.
Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't, I thought you were immediately going to go to blame the driver.
Oh, that works too. Yeah. But my driver, the question says my driver is relatively talented. I guess relatively. Yeah. Okay. We need a more talented driver. That'll fix it. Yeah. But seriously, that happens. You're like, so I've had drivers, and this actually is going to probably relate to Ross a little bit. I've had drivers come in and tell me, wow, the car's really good. It's handling very well. I really don't have any complaints. And I'm like, okay, as an engineer, you would think, good. Wow, we're really good. And then you look at the timesheet and we're like 6th out of 20. And you're like, well, okay, everything's good, but we're not fast enough. What do we do? And that's what this question is. What do we do? And I've oftentimes, and again, I'm not kidding here now. I'm not blaming it on the driver, but the first thing is the driver needs to help me some more. And if he says the car is handling good, I will start to dig in deeper and ask more questions. Okay, it's handling good I start out in turn 1. What is it doing in turn 1? Well, it just sticks. I turn in, it's great. I get on the power, great. So then I'll ask them, and this is one of Ross's famous questions, is what would happen if you brake a car length later? What would the car do? Oh, geez, it would spin right out. Okay, so now maybe our car's actually a little loose or a little oversteery, I'm thinking, even though the driver hasn't experienced that yet. What would happen if you got on the power a little earlier? 1 car length earlier. Oh man, that back would come around and I would spin out. Okay, now it probably is loose, a little oversteery. I bet we have an oversteery car. He just hasn't got there yet.
And Jeff, just to jump in again, a question I'll often ask at that point is, so what if you just carried 5-10 miles an hour more through that corner?
Yep.
And yeah, I know that's an exaggeration, but just which end of the car is going to go off first?
Right. It brings me back to what I used to do with Colin when we were go-kart racing. It happened before, he'd come in and go, wow, Dad, it's perfect. Don't touch a thing. And I'm like, no, put your helmet back on, go back out, drive it harder until it's not perfect. Then you can stop in the pits.
As a driver, sometimes our job is to find the weakness in the car.
Right. And really, to me, especially in testing, practice, that is the driver's job. If he comes in, you would think as an engineer, oh man, the car's great. Wow, you did a great job. I'm like, wrong answer. Go out, drive it harder then. Find the limit, find what it does just over the limit, and then I'll try to make that better and we'll increase the limit. And so how do you start to find the answers? In this question, how do you start to find the answers when you don't know the question? I think you have to dig into what would really happen if you went faster. what would happen to the car, what would the balance be, and if you can, from a driving standpoint, I think it's better for the driver to go out and find that, actually find the limit. Maybe not 5 to 10 miles an hour faster in your example, Ross, but a little bit faster. Just tell me what is the tendency of the car. And then if I can fix that or reduce that tendency, then the driver can use more of that grip or more of that good balance and increase that whole thing and the whole performance. And then he may say, oh, now it's perfect. Well, nope, go a little harder. It's a never ending thing. It is never perfect. It's as good as you're going to get by the time the green flag falls. You're like, okay, at some point in the weekend, depending on what kind of weekends you're running, you have to stop tinkering with it. And you need to have something that the driver knows and understands and is comfortable with. But the next time you go testing or in a practice session, it's all about making that car better. And you find out by either thinking about what would happen if you went faster or actually going out and doing it and making it happen.
So
that's
Jeff,
the way I would approach it.
When you talked about, the driver coming in and saying the car handles great, really what the driver at that point is saying, the balance is great, right?
Right.
It's not understeering, it's not oversteering. So then it becomes, give me more grip. Like, for me to go faster, maybe go down, give me more power so I get down the straightaway faster. Well, sorry, you can't do that.
Right.
Make the brakes more, help decelerate the car faster. There comes a point there where the tires have a limit of grip, and more you're either going to pile into the ABS or you're going to lock up and skid. But at some point, there's just more grip. And as I heard Sam asking the question, I'm kind of like, yeah, Jeff. What do you do if the balance is perfect, and if I go faster, all 4 corners of the car are going to go off the track and crash at the same place. It's not like I'm going to understeer off the track. It's not like I'm going to oversteer off the track. I just need more grip. Then what do you do?
Well, and that can happen. We talked about the driver pushing it harder and finding a balance flaw. What you're saying is, let's assume there is no balance flaw. We just need more grip. Okay. If I had this driver one time who his answer to everything, he would stop in the pits and he wouldn't be as, the fastest car, and he would go, give me more downforce and new tires. That was his answer to everything. And every time I did that, he went faster.
Yeah.
So if you can afford new tires, that'll help. But seriously, those are the kind of things that we would look at. If it was a prototype, I would say, are we as low as we can get? Are we making as much kind of free downforce? Getting the car lower doesn't really cost much in drag. So can we just lower the car and pick up another 50, 60 pounds of downforce? That'll just make pure grip. So ask those kind of questions. If you have a less aerodynamic car, you can, generally, and this is really a generalization, it's like everybody that's listened to this has always heard Ross and I talk about the 51% rule. 51% of the time this works. You could go softer. It will generally not load the tire as hard and make a little bit more grip. Softer anti-roll bars, softer damper settings, softer springs. The downside is now the car's going to move around more. Some drivers don't like that movement and aren't comfortable with that. And so you may not actually go faster, even though you have theoretically more grip. Driver might not be able to use it, but you can do that. You can add some downforce. You can, and see if it goes quicker depending on the particular track that you're at. So you're just looking for, okay, I said new tires, maybe less tire pressure, a bigger footprint might help in your track day car, or maybe it makes the tire less stable and more wobbly, but there's always something to try. And that's the key to it. You need to just make more grip. Try something. it's there's enough things out there that are easily adjustable. And tire pressures, everybody who does a track day has a tire pressure gauge. And I've always had this theory. Okay, you think, I just need more grip. It's handling perfectly. It's balanced perfectly. I just need more grip. Okay, take 2 PSI out of all 4 tires and go out. And if it's better, take another 2 PSI out. Keep doing that until the tire falls off the rim or it's not better anymore.
Which would be the same thing.
Right, probably. And if you take 2 PSI out and it's not better, well, go back to starting and put 2 PSI in. That may be better. I mean, there's always something to try, and you're going to learn something if you do that also. And so, how do you find that answer? Try stuff. Just keep trying things.
Jeff, a friend of ours, Samir Abid, you've been on his podcast, and and he and I have done some stuff, podcasts and webinars together. But one of the things a line that he uses a lot that I really, really love is, we learn more by experimenting than we do by experience.
God, that's great.
Right.
Man.
And you think about it as like, I just need more experience. Well, experiencing the exact same thing, you don't learn anything from that.
Right.
And I think, certainly there's a trend that I've seen with drivers is they get pounded in their head this whole, you got to get consistent. You got to get consistent. You got to be consistent. And sometimes they're so consistent so worried about that they don't ever try anything new.
Right.
They break at the same place. They turn in at the same place. They hit the same apex. They do the exact same thing. And really, what are they learning from that? So, and obviously, depending on where you are as a driver, I'm sorry to jump on this, Jeff, but if you, as a driver, you do need to get to that point before you start experimenting. But once you get to that point, you need to start experimenting. And it's the same thing with just try stuff, right?
Right. From an engineering standpoint and a driving standpoint, try things. Make the car do something. This is kind of like, I got a car, it's good, I like it, but I'm not fast enough. Well, drive the car so that it's not good and figure it out from there. And I bet you'll find out something about your driving and the car at the same time. You'd be like, whoa, it oversteers, but oh man, I don't like that, or I can't catch that, or did I cause that to oversteer? Or was the car actually doing it? And that's when it gets really fun.
Remember the time that we were working with a driver at Laguna Seca?
Yep.
And as part of the learning process for the driver, I can't remember whether it was you started this or I started this, but we kind of like, let's just do a session where we start playing with tire pressures, just so the driver learns what the effect of the changes are.
Right. And I'll butt in here a second. It was like, you said, Ross, let's make it really like slippery, so it slides around and they lose a lot of grip. And I'm like, okay, I'll just add like 8 PSI to all the tires. And now you can take the story.
Well, it's simple. The driver went faster.
Right. I'm like,
and we're like, what?
I was going to make the car worse, and we made it better.
And this was a case of a car that you had been running for. You had a lot of experience, so you knew what the window was for the tire pressures.
I thought.
Yeah.
So what? Wait. So what was it? What was the delta? Why?
Well, and I'll get to your answer in a second, Sam. The cool thing about that is, I've always said, and it kind of goes to what you said a minute ago, Ross. I love it. I never learn anything when I make a change and it does what I expect. So, okay, we're going to pump up these tires 8 PSI. It's going to get slipperier, and the driver's going to go, oh, this is terrible. I have no grip. And I'm not any smarter. I knew that was going to happen. The great things are when you make a change and it does something different than what you expect, because now I'm going to get smarter. And to your point, Sam, exactly what you just asked. So what was it? Why did that happen? How can that be? All those questions went through my mind and Ross's immediately. How can that be? And we had to start thinking about it. And what it was, we determined was it was a confidence thing with the driver. The driver on the entry to some of these high-speed corners at Laguna, which there are some, is stability. And the car, the sidewall of the tire, when it was pumped up like that, was much more stable, didn't flex, and the car didn't move around. And this driver was feeling that movement as loss of grip, or they weren't sure what was going to happen to the car, so they would back off and not push it because it's like, ooh, it's moving around. I don't know. What we did is we made the car less actual grip ultimately, but for this driver's level of experience, they weren't quite at that ultimate level of grip. So they couldn't, they weren't there, but they didn't like the movement of the car. And now the car wasn't moving. It was solid right underneath them. And they were going to, they thought, wow, this is much better. It's not moving around and I don't have to chase it and I'm not having to wonder. And they went faster.
Yeah. It's amazing what confidence will do.
Right. Right. And
even though Jeff and I were we had no confidence in what we were doing at that point in time.
Right. At that point, I'm like, oh boy.
Yeah.
And then you stick a pro driver and you bolt Ross in there and Ross is going to go, no, this is worse, because Ross drives the car right to the limit. And that extra tire pressure was going to make it worse. And when the car moves around a little bit on the entry, Ross can deal with it and he knows he's making grip. So it's like, okay to him. But for this driver who was intermediate level, I would say, it was all about confidence and gave him more confidence with the pressure.
But that's one of that harks to one of the things that I've always liked about this podcast, but B, what I like about the way you guys look at these things, and also one of those big, not open secrets, but one of those big things that a lot of people who watch racing don't necessarily know, that you don't get from social feeds and interviews and prepared hat dances and all these other things, is the notion that all of you, if you're doing it right, you're constantly asking questions from the engineer on down. You're constantly learning, and you go into the weekend with a lot of things you don't know every single weekend. And that lot of things might be a handful of, tiny microscopic things that don't impact the whole pace of everything you do over the weekend, or it might be big glacial stuff that moves slowly and you've been working that problem the whole season and you don't know. I love the notion. I love thinking about how everybody in that sport is constantly trying to answer questions where they don't even know how to define the question sometimes,
I think that's what makes it fun, right? That's why we go to the racetrack every weekend. Yeah. Because if I've said, if you could just bolt everything into a spreadsheet and hit go on your simulation and there was your perfect setup and that was that, I don't think that would be much fun.
Yeah. We wouldn't be talking about this because we wouldn't be in this sport. So
right.
And not to kind of turn the engineering question here into a driving question, but I'm kind of thinking as sort of the big takeaway here is, you need to experiment because you learn from that. But, having had the chance, because I was home to watch the last few Formula One races in the season, if you pay attention, you can see the best drivers in the world and arguably the Formula One drivers are them, but arguably, but you can see drivers at that level where their confidence level drops a little bit. And in that, when I talk about dropping a little in Formula One terms, that could be like 0.01%, but that's the difference between first and 10th on the grid.
Yep.
And you can see that if you pay attention to how Formula One drivers drive.
What have you? Okay, so answer. Forgive me, I have to be dorky. Show your work. What have you noticed? I've never thought about that. That's nuts.
So certainly one thing, every now and then they show the real cool views from inside the car, the cockpit, and you can see certain drivers who just turn in and go, man, this thing's going to stick. I mean, Verstappen right now is at a level that is above and beyond everybody else. Love him, hate him, I don't care. It doesn't matter. But he drives that car with so much confidence. And you see Perez, who does not lack talent. Guaranteed. He does not lack talent. But there are times where he seems almost hesitant to turn the wheel, or he turns it and doesn't know what's going to happen. And you can kind of, I mean, if you pay enough attention to this, you can see it in the movement of the steering wheel. Every now and then you hear a driver say something on the radio and you go, sorry, but that driver is not confident. And, you know, I'll pick on a couple just because it's interesting. As you know, you listen to George Russell behind Hamilton saying things that's almost posturing, like, you know, I've got more speed, I can get by, just let me by. Well, just drive the car, George, you know. And then Hamilton comes back later on with, you know, guys, you put me out on these tires, you know, what? Just drive the car, Lewis. Like, so, you know, at that level, that kind of stuff is happening. And I will say that I don't think all season long I ever heard Fernando Alonso ever make one of those comments on the radio that made you question. Like, he says things like, you know, he just goes, copy, got it, agreed, you know. Hey, I'm watching on the big screen and so-and-so's doing this, you know, like, right. Like his level of awareness and confidence and everything, he just drives the car. Yep. He's at that point in his career where he is unbelievable in his talent and skill and everything, but he's driving with I don't have anything to prove.
Yeah.
And I think a guy like George Russell is driving with everything to prove.
Yep.
Or
okay.
Perez.
I have the engineering side of this then. Verstappen and Perez. I'll give you, Perez doesn't have the confidence, but maybe it's because the car is not giving him the confidence. If they could change some things in the car, and I don't know what he needs, what he wants, what, you know, we've talked about this a lot. The driver has to communicate to the race engineer what he needs the car to do better so that he can go faster. And if the engineer can make that happen, then that gives the driver confidence to drive it closer to the limit. And maybe it's his engineer, maybe it's him communicating with his engineer, maybe it's team protocol. Well, no, we run both cars the same all the time, or it's parts that are available or aren't available, or no, Max always needs this kind of setup, so we built all the parts for that and we don't have what you need. I don't know the politics involved. But there's a case to be made that Perez, if the team wants Perez to be better, they need to give him more confidence somehow. And that's not just patting him on the back saying, you can do better. That's making the car do what he wants it to do.
I agree 100%, but I think not just the pat on the back, but I think outside of the car, there is a culture within Red Bull that is not as supportive to Perez as there is for Verstappen. And by the way, every driver needs a different kind of pat on the back. Mm-hmm. You know, Max Verstappen's the kind of guy that he doesn't need a whole lot of that. Like he does his own thing. You know, he doesn't need I know drivers who are like some of the best. I actually think that Lewis Hamilton needs more arm around the shoulder. Hey, Lewis, you know, we love you. You're doing a good job. Than Max Verstappen does. Mm-hmm. Does that make one better than the other? Absolutely not. It's just, it's what some drivers need more than others. Some drivers need a little more cuddling. And again, that's not meant in a bad way.
Right.
It's just the way it is. Now, I got to tell you, the number of people I've had over the past few months kind of saying, oh, well, the difference between Perez and Verstappen is Red Bull wants Verstappen to win. And they deliberately give Perez a lesser car.
Ooh.
And I go, that is total crap.
No way.
Because what is the benefit to Red Bull in doing that? In fact, there's a massive, massive financial benefit to giving Perez everything they possibly can to come in second behind Verstappen. And
sure.
So to think that they would deliberately sabotage Perez is total crap.
Right. I agree.
And there's my rant on drivers and things. And I guess, I don't know. Sorry.
Sam's smiling. He's like, man, these guys, They asked a question and they are not even close to on topic anymore.
No, it stands.
I took your engineering question and turned it into a driving question.
It's great though.
I just love how at the end of that, Ross Bentley, the world's nicest human, gets to the end of a very mild rant that was in no way aggressive or mean. It was like, basically just apologized for it. He's like, I'm so sorry. It's not Canadian. We can't do this.
Okay. As a Canadian, I'm sorry.
Fair. Accepted and noted. Thank you. No, that was really interesting. I never thought about half of that, most of that, all of that. But do you guys want to get to the next question or stick it in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So we have David Snelling. He says, keeping to rear wheel drive, he's driving an E46 M3, a BMW, and his friends are in a Porsche Cayman R and a Porsche 996 GT3 911. So he has a two-part question on downshifting.
Sorry, I can't count to two.
I'm a writer.
That's why we have Sam here. He's gonna.
I guarantee you, I can get to at least 4 or 5. I stop at 6, but I can count to 2.
Good.
So, first part is for a single downshift. Is it better to downshift earlier or later in the braking process? And the second part is for a double downshift, meaning going from fifth gear to third gear, for example. Go through 2 gears, right? For a double downshift, is it better to A, skip shift, going directly from, say, 5th to 3rd, or B, row through each gear without blipping or releasing the clutch in the middle, in, say, 4th gear, or C, fully shift with a blip and a clutch release to engage the interim gear? And there are other follow-up questions on this, such as what other factors and scenarios come into play? Like, do you have to think about types of braking zones, types of corners, use of engine braking, like rear traction versus front, all these things. Basically, he's asking about downshifting on entry to the corner and when and how you think about the mechanics of it, right?
Okay. 1, later. 2A, skip. 2B, release. 2C, fully blip and clutch release.
I'm confused. You've confused the English major, which is very interesting to do.
Other scenarios. Yes, there are other scenarios. Types of brake. Yes. Okay. How's that?
I see. That's how we get through 17 questions per episode.
Yes. No.
Yeah.
That's a silly question. We're done.
Okay. So the question about, you better to downshift earlier or later in the brake zone. So first of all, I think the thing here is that David's actually thinking through all this stuff, which is important. I'm going to say as a general rule, and, for Jeff's more than 51% of the time, and I'm going to say this works at least 90% of the time, is later is better. Because if you downshift too early in the brake zone, you run the risk of over-revving the engine, locking up the rear wheels, or at least upsetting the car by downshifting too early. And, yes, somebody's going to go, yeah, well, what about using the engine to slow the car down? Okay, if your car is running out of brakes, you might need to do a little bit of that. But generally, I'm going to say the brakes are for slowing the car down. The engine's for making the car accelerate. So don't mix those two up. So I'm going to say generally later in the brake zone is better. My only rule there is, and this is, again, a rule that works way more than 51% of the time, is complete the downshift before turning into the corner. Now, somebody's going to go, yeah, but with my PDK auto shift, downshift, blah, 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 auto blip car, I can downshift in the middle of the corner. Yes, that is true. You can do that. I'm going to say still, I don't see a lot of benefit in doing that most times. There's a couple little minor times when it can be beneficial. But I'm going to say, as a really good general rule, complete your downshift before turning into the corner. And by complete, I mean, you engaged it in gear, your foot's come off the clutch, and your left foot has gone over and back over to that dead pedal or rest pad area. That's a complete downshift. So there's the answer to the first question. Let's see. Second one is skip shifting. So going from, rather than going from 5th to 4th to 3rd to 2nd, just go 5th to 2nd. I'm a big believer in doing that. Obviously in a manual shift, you can't do that in a sequential, but I'm a big believer in doing that only once you've gotten into the right rhythm. And what do I teach somebody who's relatively new to track driving to skip shift? No, you really should go through the gears so you get the timing and rhythm of fifth to fourth, fourth to third, third to second. Because the one big no if you skip shift is you come into the brake zone and you go fifth, second, and over rev the engine because you're rushing it too much because you haven't gotten into that right rhythm yet. So, but then skip shift once you've gotten to the right timing and rhythm and all that kind of stuff, because I'm a big believer in the less you do, the less chance of making a mistake. So one downshift, you're better. Now, you do have to make sure you get a nice blip on the downshift and hopefully you're heel and toe and all that kind of stuff if you're driving that kind of a car, which E46, manual transmission, yes, you are. Right foot, heel and toe, going from fifth or third down to second. So that's the case. Let's see, where were we? Row through each without blipping or releasing clutch. No, I don't like that approach because there you're basically freewheeling with your foot on the clutch. And I think that's kind of what he's talking about here. Yep. I just like, if you're going to downshift, the foot comes off the clutch each time. And again, part of that is the rhythm that comes with it. And then, fully shift with blip and clutch release to engage the interim gear, in this case, fourth on your way down to three. Again, yes, I think that if you're at that stage with your driving where you're working on this whole thing, that, it is all about getting the right timing and rhythm and everything. And that's, so yes, go through that whole process of, clutch in, move the shifter, blip the throttle, let the clutch out, and with each one and going through and doing that. So I that's how I approach it. And again, once you're at that point where you've got the right timing, then you can just brake. You're in fifth gear, let's say. You're brake, clutch in, move the shifter down to second, blip the throttle, let the clutch out, foot over on the dead pedal, turn into the corner. And it's that timing towards the end of the brake zone. And what other factors? I mean, does it matter some of the types of brake zones? Yeah, a little bit. I've driven cars like this on tracks where you're kind of turning in and braking at the same time, or you're braking and turning in at the same time. And an example would be turn one at Daytona, turn one if you're driving on the road course at Homestead. A lot of where you're coming off of banking on a oval when you're driving a roval track, where you're kind of coming off the banking, you're braking and turning at the same time, and it's a big long brake zone, and you can't brake at maximum because you've got a little steering angle put in. You have to be a little more precise and gentle with the downshifts, because if you get a little wheel in and you get a little lockup or close to lockup in the rear, the thing's just going to snap on you. So there's a good case for skipping the downshifts and just going directly to that. And, again, going back to are we downshifting to add extra braking to the rear? No, I don't believe in that approach. Are there drivers?
I don't either.
Good.
Most people who try that end up coming in with, whatever, depending on your engine, bent valves or something screwed up.
Yeah.
Modern cars will with a paddle shift will actually deny the downshift if you try to do that.
Yeah.
But, it knows what the wheel speed is. It knows what the engine speed is. It knows what gear you're asking for. And it will just say, nope. And it won't run the actuator to put it in that gear because it doesn't want to jack it up.
Which is a good experience for somebody, let's say, driving a E46 M3, drive a modern car and try to do some of the things you're talking about here of rushing it or braking or downshifting too early. And the modern car is going to say, nope, you can't do that. And so your E46 should also say, nope, you're not doing this. Don't do that to me.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Yep. I got one for you, Ross. So what about the old double clutching? Let me tell my quick story.
Okay.
Running Porsches, not too long ago with factory drivers, and the factory drivers are double clutching. In other words, they put the clutch, how does that work? You put the clutch in, put it in neutral on your way from third to fourth, put it in neutral, let the clutch out, put the clutch back in, and then go to third. And they would do that all the time. And that was their, and I was like, what are these guys doing? I mean, these were top. This was one, I had a very famous Porsche GT German driver and I'll give the name away, but a very famous American Porsche GT driver. And they both did it. And they were not slow. They were factory Porsche drivers, really fast. And their explanation was, well, it saves the gearbox and it's much better on fuel mileage. And I thought that was interesting.
So I don't know why it would be better on fuel mileage. That's an engineering question.
I looked at the data. It's because they had their foot off the gas longer.
Oh, okay.
That if you didn't do that, it was simply, you could have just coasted for an extra 0.3 of a second, done the same thing.
Yeah.
And they said that it originated way, way back. And they were taught that. And to become a factory Porsche driver at the time, this was required. If you didn't do that, you would get fired. And it was because of the old synchro mesh transmissions where you had to do that.
So I don't know specifically that Porsche and where I had heard that, Porsche factory drivers at one time were told, you must do this. And so there is that. How much of that was left over from the days when the gearboxes were not as good and the synchros were not as good and all that kind of stuff? I don't know. Hey, there was a time way back when with sports cars, you had to double clutch. That was the only way you could get it into gear, right? And,
right.
So I'm going to say there was a time when if you went to the Jim Russell Racing School where they would teach double clutching with a dog ring, Hewling gearbox.
Wow.
And so I learned it. I will say, I'm trying to think, this would have been 1995, 96. I was driving, racing against you, Jeff, I was driving a Riley and Scott.
Oh yeah.
Chassis, world sports car against, I think you were engineering the Ferrari 333.
Yep.
I'd driven the Ferrari and then got in the Riley and Scott. But for the 24-hour race, I double clutched on all my downshifts.
Wow. And
it was, there was a fun rhythm, and the brake zones were long enough where you could just, boom, not going to let the clutch out on in between as you went through on the downshift. And my thinking was it did two things. One is I think it was easier on the gearbox.
Mm-hmm.
I can't prove it. We didn't break a gearbox in the race. So there you go. There's proof.
Right.
Causation does not, no.
Right. And you didn't blow out your throwout bearing on your clutch?
Nope.
Okay.
Okay. So there was that part. But the length of the brake zone was perfect for double clutching. Like it wasn't, today, Jeff, you and I this year with the LMP2 cars, this year they reduced the horsepower on the LMP2 cars. So the LMP2 cars would get to brake zones going, I forget like how many miles an hour slower than they were last year.
A lot.
A lot.
Yep.
And a lot of the LMP2 drivers, which is just a paddle shift on a downshift, they would complain about the brake zone is so short. I don't have time to go from 6/4, 5th down to a second gear. Like they're just going bang, 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 bang on the way down. And it's almost like they don't have enough time to do that. In the case of the driving this Riley and Scott at that time, the brake zone was the perfect length of time for me to go. I think we're only running 5 speeds then, weren't we? Yeah.
Yep.
We hadn't learned how to count to 6 yet.
The Ferrari had the magic 6-speed though.
Yeah. And so you'd come down there and you would brake, and the timing of a double clutch to 4th, down to 3rd, down. And then what I did was I then just eliminated all those downshifts, and I would just come down there and I brake in 5th gear. and then do a double clutch down into second gear, turn in, and away it would go. And it was just the right timing, and the rhythm got going, and I would drive Daytona the 24 like that. Now, later in the season, doing the sprint races, no.
So there's no performance, there's no lap time advantage to double clutching. You would only do it to save your equipment if you thought that was beneficial.
Yeah. And if somebody says, should I learn how to double clutch? I'd go, don't bother.
Don't bother. Yeah.
You know, I guess there's a side of me that goes, you know, it's good to be adaptable. Like I will say, I was driving, I got asked to come and do, I don't know, what was a World Racing League race, or maybe it was the time that you and Colin and I went and did the chump car race in the Miata.
Yep.
It was like, you know, this transmission just feels a little fragile. I've got time. I'm going to double clutch.
Right.
And some of it was just, you know, I don't want to forget how to do this.
Right. Well, we did break the transmission at that race, didn't we?
What I remember is Jeff, the engineer,
right.
the world-class engineer, who was also going to drive in the race as well, spent an hour and a half underneath this Miata changing the transmission so that Colin and I could drive more.
Well, I hadn't got to drive yet. I just wanted to drive.
Yeah.
Oh,
Can I tell one other quick story about that?
Yeah.
I think you and Colin kind of pulled me aside before the race and went, shh, we got a really strong motor in this Miata.
Yeah.
And then I remember coming out of turn 7 at Road Atlanta, and I get man, I nailed this exit. And I'm halfway down the back straight, and this Miata pulls out behind me and pulls out and drives around me. And I'm going, guys, you guys aren't cheating enough.
Right. Whenever you think you got more power or more money than somebody else, you don't. Somebody always does. Has more.
Okay, and one last thing about that race, because that was a fun weekend.
That was a blast.
I think that race started something like 110 cars.
Yep.
And I remember you did the math, and it was like, if we put them all nose to tail, they're like 3 feet apart.
Yeah, that's the gap was that wasn't. I don't think you were far off. It was less than a car length between cars if you lined them all up.
Yeah.
And IMSA's worried, we're going to start 52 cars at Road Atlanta, and no, we started
doubled that
easy.
Yeah. Okay, so there's my answers on downshifting.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, today's cars with the paddle shift and the auto blip and the everything else. I remember not too long ago, Daytona prototype days, back in the original Daytona prototypes when they first came out in Grand Am, blowing up engines. I was running a GM engine, Pontiac engine actually, GM, but they would, the engine people would look at the RPM after each session. And we were, I guess we were leasing those engines. And if you had too much of an over rev after the session, you were required, they would make you pull the engine out and pay for a rebuild because it was their engine. We were just leasing it. And if it exploded, it was their cost. And those were they sequential? Yeah, they must have been sequential at the time.
I'm not sure they were.
Maybe not. Maybe they were H pattern. Anyway, it happened so often because drivers would miss a shift or go from whatever 5th to 4th and get 2nd and let the clutch out. And boom, and the engine wouldn't blow up then, but it would in the next session. And so GM made us pull the engines out. Ford did the same thing. And now, you used to hear it all the time. Oh, he missed a shift. I haven't heard that term in, I don't know, 10 years.
Yeah.
No, you can't miss a shift.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll get the very rare occasion, and I'm sure you guys get it too with these gearboxes, is you'll get we call it a false neutral.
Yeah.
Where just out of the luck of it, you'll get a dog to dog and it won't go in gear when you pull. You're flat to the floor, you're not lifting, you just pull the gear and it quickly interrupts the engine power for milliseconds, which is adjustable, and it lets the gear go in. And sometimes the dog will bounce off the other one and you won't get it. Maybe once every 3 weekends, you'll get one of those. So it's really hard to screw it up nowadays.
Yeah. So you were talking about that, and I remember back way back in when I drove Indy cars, we were driving. I was using the Chevy Ilmore, and I remember, I can't remember what it was, but at the end of a race, it was the same kind of thing. You were allowed 5 over revs or something like that as part of the lease deal, and obviously, and it also depended, like if the over rev was, 200 RPM versus 2000 RPM, and there was sort of some scale or something like that. There was one driver who was famous for rushing his downshifts, which goes back to the question here. Is he was famous, and this was for causing over revs, and this would have been an H pattern 6-speed IndyCar gearbox. Mm-hmm. So he's going, 6th to 5th, 4th, down through all the gears, and I remember being at Long Beach and us laughing because somebody from Ilmore said, 87 over revs in a race. And by the way, during the race, like the teams would get this call from Ilmore where, okay, you're now at 15.
Right.
You have a choice. You park the car now and, we freshen something or check something. If it gets to like 25, then it becomes you're going to park the car, or now the engine rebuild is going to be this. And then there is again a scale kind of thing. And there just comes a point where the team owner says, look, we're running this thing till it blows up, or we're going to run to the end. And in this case, it ran with 87 over revs.
Jeez. Yeah. We would have the dreaded business guy from GM would walk up with his little clipboard, and there's this release form. You have 15 over revs. You must take the engine out, or you could sign it. And then now if it blew up, you had to pay for the whole engine.
Yeah.
And but nobody cares about that. It just doesn't happen. Shifting has become. Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing I'll have is denied downshifts. And the first thing, and it usually happens with our bronze rated drivers. They'll be like, oh, I got a denied downshift. Oh, I got another one. Oh, I got another one. It's like, don't rush the downshift. Be more patient.
Which goes back. That is no different than what David is asking about here. Mm-hmm. It's do it as late in the brake zone as possible, but give yourself time so you're not rushing it, and that you're complete the downshift before turning into the corner. And do as little as possible by skip shifting if you're comfortable with doing that. And if you, by skip shifting, you end up rushing it and over revving the engine, that was not a good decision.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. What you said here, except the skip shifting in a paddle shift car, all applies.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Funny how that works.
Yeah. It's cool.
Okay.
Good. Well, is this, now everybody can flip over to It's Not the Car podcast and go listen to that one, because that's up and ready.
So I don't know whether some of the tangents that we get off on and some of my rant, some of that's going to show up in the It's Not the Car, isn't it, Sam?
Well, I hope so. Maybe not the rants, just because you felt very bad after that. I could see your face on the camera. You were very, very shameful because Ross Bentley had gone on a rant. But the best part about it is that I love it. I'm sitting here. I needed a bucket of popcorn. I love listening to you guys go on tangents, and the new show and all of its components, all the different types of episodes we're going to do with it, will give both of you, and hopefully me and anybody else we have on it, more of an opportunity to be kind of off-piste, as it were, while also orbiting, some central topic that's pretty compelling on its own. So I'm looking forward to it.
And if you put up with some of our tangents that Jeff and I go on every now and then, just wait until you get to a couple of Sam's tangents.
You haven't seen anything yet.
Nobody needs my tangents. I apologize in advance. That's the whole point, right? The whole point of the show, and the reason we called it, and all three of us decided to call it It's Not the Car, is because ultimately the human stories, the reasons we do these things they're always way more compelling than the machine. Those people making those misshifts are a lot more interesting than, well, a dog hung up and, two dog teeth met together and, when When two dogs love each other very much, certain things happen. But that's the reasons, the human reasons are always what's the most compelling. And that's why we wanted to do this, and why we decided, after talking to Ross, Jeff and I decided, and Ross decided, that it would all make more sense to kind of spin up a brand new brand and a name for it and run with it under its own umbrella. So,
yep.
Yeah.
It's going to be great. It's going to be great. Well, it is great already. Go check it out.
Yeah, go check it out. Go over there right now. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's not
good.
the car.
And
It's Not the Car. Anywhere you find your podcast, check it out, subscribe, drop us an email, comment, let us know what you think.
Thank you.
Sounds great. And as always, have fun.
Have fun.
Have fun. Thanks.